You took the pain pills, right? So you shouldn't hurt anymore, right? And go ahead and vacuum. My husband looked at the pills I just swallowed. Wait a bit for them to work. I'll do the vacuuming properly, I said. He got up with a big sigh. I'm not saying I want to switch chores with him, but he could at least wait a bit, I thought, trying not to sigh. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my back, and I fell to the floor. I saw my husband rudely propping his foot on the back of the sofa. The pain was so bad I couldn't talk. Did he just kick me in the back? My husband laughed at me. I don't care if you're in pain. Just hurry up and vacuum. My name is Sally, and I'm 27 years old. I'm a regular housewife living with my husband Jacob. Our story goes back to when I joined the same company where Jacob worked. After finishing university, I got a job in sales. Jacob helped me a lot in the beginning, acting as my mentor. Jacob was handsome with short hair, and customers liked him. He had a talent for persuading people and sealing deals easily. In sales, there are two types of successful people: those who know a lot about what they're selling and use that to convince customers, and those who just have a way with people and make customers want to buy from them personally. Jacob was definitely the second type. At first, I just looked up to Jacob for his success in sales, but when I struggled to close a deal and felt low, Jacob reached out to me. Over time, we grew closer, going out for meals and spending more time together. Eventually, I developed feelings for him. So when we started dating, I was incredibly happy, even crying tears of joy. And when he proposed, I was so thrilled that I couldn't stop jumping around with happiness. After we got married, we were very happy together. But there's one thing that brings me down sometimes. I've had severe menstrual cramps since I was in school. At first, I used simple painkillers from the store, but as time passed, I needed stronger ones to handle the pain. When Jacob and I were dating, he was really understanding during my periods. He would change his plans to help me, rub my back when I was hurting, and listen to me complain. I thought this care would continue after we got married, but things changed. During my period, I'd do my chores when the painkillers kicked in, take a break on the sofa for a bit, and then get back to work. But to Jacob, it seemed like I was just lying around all day. No matter how much I did around the house, he never showed any sympathy. Then we bought a new house. We used to live in an apartment, but we got a bigger place because we wanted to have kids someday. Jacob's parents like to have parties, so he decided we should host the next one at our new house. Jacob got everything organized really quickly. He told everyone the date and time of the party and gave me a list of relatives who were coming, along with their ages and what foods they didn't like. I was shocked when Jacob told me, sounding annoyed, that I needed to cater to everyone's taste for the party and that he wouldn't forgive me if I bought ready-made food. Planning the menu was tough because everyone had different dislikes, and what one person liked, another person hated. I spent several nights staying up late planning the menu. Then, just as my period, which was a bit late, started, I took a painkiller and finished cleaning the room. I decorated it with flowers, put out air fresheners, and kept going over the party plans in my head. That evening, I finished preparing the food for the party and went to bed. Jacob was laughing loudly at the TV while having his nightly drink while I was trying to finish up, dealing with my period pain. I fell asleep, remembering Jacob's laughter. On the morning of the party, I woke up before Jacob made breakfast and started cooking for the guests while tidying up. I kept checking the clock nervously as I worked. After finishing cooking, I set the dishes on the table and checked the entrance, living room, and bathroom thoroughly. The painkiller was wearing off, and the pain was getting worse. I sat down on the sofa, feeling like I couldn't bear it anymore. I wanted to lie down, but I had done my hair and makeup nicely, and I didn't know when the relatives would arrive, so I stayed seated. I looked at Jacob, who was watching TV with a drink in his hand. Even though we had to greet the guests soon, he was already drinking. I wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. Jacob noticed me looking at him and glared back. "What's wrong? Are you telling me not to drink so early?" Jacob asked. "No, not really." Suddenly, there was a loud noise. I get nervous too, you know. "And you seem so relaxed on the sofa. I figured you were done getting ready," Jacob said, setting down his drink and walking toward me. His stare made me feel uneasy, and I had a bad feeling about it. "I'm almost done, but my period started. I took some painkillers, but they're wearing off, so I'm taking a short break. I'll be fine soon," I explained to Jacob. Hearing this, Jacob let out a heavy sigh and glared at me. Don't act like a victim just because of a little stomachache. My mom never complained like this, Jacob snapped. Right after he said that, I felt like Jacob was walking behind me, but suddenly, I was kicked in the back and fell from the sofa to the floor. It took me a moment to realize I had been kicked. Ignoring me, Jacob sat back on the sofa and started playing a game on his phone as if nothing had happened. I didn't understand what was going on, but one thing was clear. Jacob was enjoying his game, not apologizing at all. As I tried to get up to leave, Jacob suddenly fell to the floor. I quickly looked up to see his father standing behind the sofa, looking very angry. I couldn't take my eyes off him. "What's happening?" Jacob asked, looking confused as he checked the sofa. "Dad, did you just push me?" Jacob inquired, picking up his phone from the floor. "I didn't just push you, I shoved you," my father-in-law replied. "Why? What's going on?" "Wait, are you serious? Why would you kick someone in the back? Especially Jacob, she's your wife." My father-in-law scolded him. Jacob seemed a bit surprised by my father-in-law's anger. "Well, I had a few drinks and lost control," he tried to explain, but my father-in-law wasn't buying it. "Don't blame it on alcohol. No excuse for a man to hit a woman," my father-in-law said firmly. "What do you mean?" "It's just a way to discipline," Jacob argued back. "Discipline?" "She was taking a break on the sofa because she was in pain. I was teaching her that she doesn't work, she doesn't rest." "Isn't that right, Sally?" Jacob asked, turning to me for support. I didn't know how to answer Jacob's sudden question. I had finished preparing and was just trying to rest on the sofa. Maybe I should just tell the truth. Seeing my dilemma, my father-in-law looked at me. "Sally, is what Jacob said true?" he asked. I couldn't bring myself to answer. If I told the truth now, Jacob might get upset, and that wouldn't be fair to the relatives who were coming over to see our new home. I was trying to figure out what to say when my father-in-law spoke again. "Sally, your silence says a lot, doesn't it?" he remarked. "Sorry," I managed to mumble, feeling confused by his words. "If Jacob was telling the truth, you would have confirmed it right away, but you stayed silent. Does that mean there's something, or everything, wrong with his story?" My father-in-law's words struck me hard. I wanted to tell the truth. "Everything's ready, we just need to welcome the guests." "I'm just not feeling well today," I said, trying to be diplomatic. "Ah, you're just on your period?" Jacob interjected abruptly. I felt like crying at his lack of sensitivity. I had carefully chosen my words to avoid such a direct topic in front of my father-in-law, and yet. "Stop saying my period is just an excuse for feeling unwell. If you're done with your tasks, just say so. It seems like you think I'm sitting around doing nothing because I haven't finished." Jacob kept talking, not noticing how hard I'd been working. That's how Jacob saw things. He didn't remember me telling him earlier that I was almost done with the preparations. He didn't see all the work I've been doing since early morning, even since yesterday, getting everything ready and cooking. He didn't see me taking pills to cope with the pain and keep going. He decided we'd have the gathering here but didn't lift a finger to help with the preparations or cooking. I did it all by myself. I started to get really angry. "Listen to me," I began, but Jacob cut me off. "She's always complaining about how bad her menstrual cramps are, but she never gets used to them. Every month when she gets her period, this is what happens," Jacob said, turning to his father. "Dad, Mom wasn't like this, right?" Jacob sought validation. "But it seems I made the right choice to come over early and help Sally since you, Jacob, decided to host this gathering without considering her." "What? Inconsiderate? Me? No, Jacob, that's you. If you had worked with Sally, you would have seen how hard she worked on the preparations despite her pain. Instead, what did you do? Did you start drinking before everyone arrived? You were the one slacking off, Jacob." My father-in-law's outburst shocked everyone there. Jacob seemed to shrink back at his father's words. I didn't want Jacob to regret this like I do. "I've tried to educate you about this, but..." My father-in-law sat down heavily, sighing deeply. "Your mother also suffered from severe menstrual cramps like Sally." As a man with no knowledge about menstruation, back when information wasn't as easily available as it is now, I used to think your mother, who couldn't handle her own body, was just being spoiled. I thought only people who couldn't manage themselves suffered from menstruation. My father-in-law spoke slowly, as if remembering the past, his gaze distant. "Back then, painkillers were just for peace of mind. Your mother, being a full-time housewife, was told by my mother to do all the household chores. no matter how much menstrual pain she was in. I didn't let her rest. Then, one day, your mother fainted. I rushed her to the hospital, and the doctor told us she had endometriosis. Because of that, her dream of giving you siblings became impossible. My father-in-law continued. Jacob listened intently, staring at my father-in-law's face. Every person's body is different, and not everyone will have the same experiences. But if you ignore severe menstrual pain, it can lead to illness. Your mother did get sick. She was dealing with household chores, raising children, caring for her in-laws, and living with an inconsiderate husband. She had many sources of stress. She ended up infertile and couldn't get pregnant as she had hoped. I blamed it on the times and blamed my mother, but I was wrong. It was my responsibility to understand. It's a pain that we men can't experience, so I should have properly listened to your mother and accepted her as she was. I failed to do that. It was my fault. I regret not challenging my mother's views and remaining ignorant, even now. My father-in-law spoke in a somber tone, gently supported by my mother-in-law. I could only nod to my mother-in-law, who had just arrived, with a sad smile on her face. You did your best to understand me, didn't you? Despite your demanding job, you even helped out with household chores. And to think that you cut ties with your own parents for me, my mother-in-law looked at my father-in-law with kind eyes. Of course I did. I didn't want to burden you any more than I already had. I wanted the three of us to live happily, so that's why I did what I did. But cutting ties with my parents was a big decision. I wanted to avoid having to make such big decisions. That's why I've always tried to teach you, Jacob, hoping that you wouldn't make the same mistakes as I did. But it seems that I wasn't able to convey that to you at all. My father-in-law explained. Feeling the weight of the conversation, Jacob tried to lighten the mood. Hey, don't you think you're being a bit too dramatic, Dad? In my memory, sure. There were times when Mom was really unwell and had to lie down. But I don't remember her ever having to lay down because of something as minor as her period. Is this some kind of nostalgia bias? Are you maybe just assuming it was harder than it really was? Jacob's words hit a nerve. My mother-in-law's hand, resting on my father-in-law's shoulder, trembled slightly. He gently patted her hand and gave Jacob a stern look. You just forgot. Of course, as a mother, she'd want to shield her child from worry. She tried her best not to let you see. But if it were just a matter of gritting your teeth and bearing it, it wouldn't be a disease. Your mother did have to lie down because she was suffering from period pain. I remember you coming home from school and saying that she was asleep again. I remember having an honest discussion with you about it. She wasn't just shirking responsibilities. She had no choice but to lie down because she was unwell. It seems you didn't even notice that. You weren't looking at Sally, and you weren't looking at your mother either. My father-in-law expressed his disappointment. Upon hearing Jacob's words, my father-in-law looked visibly disheartened. I didn't know what to say or if I should even try to ease the tension. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Glancing at the clock, it was 5 minutes before our agreed gathering time. Despite my aching stomach, I hurriedly answered the door. As expected, it was one of our relatives. I quickly greeted them and rushed back to the front door. Upon opening it, all of our relatives stood there, holding a beautifully arranged bouquet of flowers as a housewarming gift. I thanked them warmly, provided guest slippers, and courteously ushered them into the living room. When all the relatives entered the living room, the tension between Jacob and my in-laws was palpable. The relatives exchanged uneasy glances with each other. What's happening? One of the relatives asked my father-in-law. Thanks for coming to Jacob's housewarming party. We were just in the middle of a disagreement, so I apologize for the tense atmosphere, my father-in-law explained. Jacob here thought Sally was just being lazy when she was actually resting on the sofa because she wasn't feeling well. He pushed her off the sofa. So I was reprimanding him. At my father-in-law's words, all the relatives looked shocked, and a younger woman among them approached me with concern. Are you okay? You must be exhausted from all the preparations, she said sympathetically. I shook my head in response. No, it's just... I'm dealing with really painful menstrual cramps. What are you saying? Even workplaces offer menstrual leave, you know. I've used it myself. The woman remarked in disbelief. The severity varies, but if it's really bad, you can take time off work. Why can't you rest at home? With determination, she turned her gaze towards Jacob, who seemed intimidated by the disapproving looks from his parents and all the relatives. Unable to withstand their stares, Jacob hurriedly left the room and retreated to his own. Despite his departure, neither his parents nor any of the relatives followed him. It appeared that the relatives understood my mother-in-law's condition, and even the men showed empathy, which was a relief. Immediately, my father-in-law and mother-in-law approached me, apologizing profusely for their son's behavior, while the relatives admired the newly constructed house and praised the delicious home-cooked meal I had prepared. Not a single person blamed me. Everyone was impressed by the meal I had served, and I received plenty of compliments. Feeling somewhat uplifted, the painkillers began to take effect, and I found myself enjoying the gathering. After some time, I received an email from Jacob. In his message, he expressed frustration that he couldn't enjoy the event because of me and lamented how unfair it was that he was being isolated from the family, with no one taking his side. His choice to communicate via email rather than face-to-face conversation left me feeling upset. As I was contemplating how to respond, my mother-in-law glanced at my smartphone. Upon seeing the message, she immediately rose from her seat. My father-in-law, noticing her reaction, inquired, "What's happening?" My mother-in-law swiftly took the smartphone from me and handed it to him. As my father-in-law read the message, he too stood up abruptly. "He still doesn't get it. We need to take him back and start over with his education," he declared. It was an unexpected development, but my in-laws appeared resolute. Soon, the relatives also voiced agreement, suggesting that Jacob needed to be re-educated, and it seemed they were fully supportive of the idea. After some time, as the relatives gradually departed, my mother-in-law made her way to Jacob's room and pulled him out. With both his parents gripping his arms, they whisked him away before he could protest. About a week after Jacob returned to his parents' home, I received an email from him. He shared how my mother-in-law had been tirelessly educating him about women's bodies, the challenges of menstrual pain, and even had him do household chores while pretending to experience menstrual discomfort. He complained about the difficulty of balancing work and chores. I couldn't help but chuckle as I read his complaints. It seemed like they were indeed starting his education from scratch, just as they had promised. Perhaps now he was beginning to grasp a bit of what I had been going through, and it brought a smile to my face. During Jacob's absence, I decided to address my menstrual pain head-on. Encouraged by my female relatives, who suggested seeing a gynecologist for my severe discomfort, I visited a clinic. The doctor provided helpful advice on medications and lifestyle changes. Living without Jacob's interference turned out to be surprisingly comfortable. I could go about my day at my own pace and rest on the sofa whenever I needed. It was a life where I could prioritize taking care of my body. I found myself wanting to prolong this peaceful period. Part of it was due to my mother-in-law's guidance, but mostly I simply enjoyed the relaxed lifestyle. I chose not to respond to any of Jacob's emails. A few weeks later, Jacob returned home with my in-laws. They sat him down at the dining table and handed him a business card. It turned out to be a lawyer's contact information, and I was shocked, fearing that we were about to initiate divorce proceedings right then and there. Feeling slightly overwhelmed, I listened as my father-in-law spoke quietly. "Sally, if he ever mistreats you again, don't hesitate to contact this person for a divorce," he said, his gaze serious. During the time Jacob was away, it seems he had a serious conversation with my in-laws and promised to change his ways. Since then, Jacob has kept his word, no longer acting arrogantly and willingly helping with household chores, especially when I'm struggling with my period. His dismissive comments about my period and its pain had also gradually faded away. Finally, I found myself settling into a peaceful life with Jacob, which was a huge relief. Going forward, I intend to prioritize my health and well-being, living sensibly, and taking good care of my body.